I think she's good. Yes? Oh, you want to show me your fan?
No, I can show them.
Oh, you want to show them the fans? Okay.
Okay, so I made this red fan and colored it in before so it wouldn't go all bumpy. But then Isaac made this fan and gave it to me. This fan. It's tough. And since it was already folded, I had to do it with the bumpy bits, but I wanted to do it a different color so that there were no like this. So like I could do maybe like it'd be like I had two normal fans too. Also, the big fan actually did more air, and the small fan did less. That's why I like the look of the small fan more, but I like the way it did the air with the big fan.
Yeah,
so yeah, they're both equal.
It's pushing around the air. It's good that you're enjoying your own creations. Did you want to write that poem for Mommy?
Yes.
No? Okay, I'm just going to go.
Okay. Feel this.
It does.
A lot of air.
It does feel very good.
Look, and less air, right?
It's very cooling. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Marjorie Taylor Greene because it does look as if she broke the law. Somebody from, let's see, WSB-TV, Metro Atlanta's #1 source for breaking news, weather, and traffic. They're breaking a story on Marjorie Taylor Greene and her husband having active homestead exemptions on 2 different houses in 2 different counties, which is against the law in Georgia, because it's a big tax break that any Georgia homeowner is entitled to for their primary residence. So if you're claiming that exemption for 2 primary residences, then you are breaking the law. It's against the law to file for more than 1. So that's smart that Channel 2 investigative reporter Justin Gray was able to pull records showing the Greenes are getting the tax break on 2 different homes in 2 different counties. Now, this isn't just gossip about Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's a little bit of an indictment of Republican approaches to taxes and to finding ways to either legally or illegally minimize the amount of contribution that they make to their communities, to their societies, to their country. You want to show your art? Okay. My daughter's got some art that she wants to show to the internet. Here you go. This is some cells that she has created with various media, and it's a beautiful artwork, darling. I'm very proud of it. It looks so scientific. Do you want me to hold it up for a bit so they can see, if I hold it like this, so they can appreciate the beautiful paintwork and the 3-dimensional nature of that art? Thank you, sweetheart.
They're all cells, all of them.
They're all cells, yes.
And I worked really hard, but I did notice that this would be dripping all the way here. This golden bit, see this bit?
Here's the golden paint that's dripped. It does look almost like a suppurating wound. Okay, good cells, good work. So yes, that's the news, and I'm bringing it up because we also have Matt Gaetz breaking news, and that's been breaking for a while, that Matt Gaetz is implicated in various crimes committed with Joel Greenberg, a Seminole tax county collector in Florida, which is an elected position that he was encouraged to run for by his congressman buddy, Matt Gaetz, and they're involved, well, at least Greenberg has been accused of crimes of various fraud and embezzlement of substantial amounts of money, as well as sex trafficking of women, paying women for sex, and also trafficking a minor, sex trafficking a minor.
Yes. I also colored in this rainbow Pikachu.
Wow, rainbow Pikachu. It's beautiful. I love how many colors it has. It's so such a rainbow creation.
And it's having a party, which is a gold rainbow rain party, because see, her hair color is gold, so it goes with the gold. And it's a rainbow dress, because she has a rainbow dress, and she just got these new blue tattoos, which are the color of rain. So yeah,
have fun.
Good though.
Thanks,
That's why she's sort of that party. Also, for some good challenges with some good winners
Wow.
and good points.
And
But work doesn't have to be like that.
it's
If
true.
they don't win.
Sometimes if there's a winner, there has to be a loser. In some game paradigms.
Yeah, plus, if you cheated, you can't go in any more games, because then if people don't see they cheated, most people do and only one people does, then that person who does think that they cheated will get kicked out, and the person who really did cheat will get to be the winner. But cheaters don't deserve to get win.
But sometimes cheaters still do. But overall, you hope if non-cheaters speak out strongly against cheating and set a good example of not cheating themselves, and a plethora of taxpayers actually do contribute, and also ask that their legislators hold to account the wealthy who may have found entrenched methods of evading contributing through tax, then yes, I noticed that the Biden administration is doing more to beef up the IRS's capacity to run audits of not only middle class income earners, but also the very wealthy, who often it requires more resources for the Internal Revenue Service to have to go after tax evasion. But without formalized enforcement of tax laws, then essentially there is a pass given to the uber wealthy to fail to contribute to the society, whose taxpayers, who actually have paid the tax and contributed to the infrastructure of that society, have created the basis for their business and financial success, which is why paying tax is really important. And it's really important to have a well-funded and motivated IRS equipped with hardworking people who will go after the wealthy as well as the less wealthy. How we go? You still have something to say, don't you?
And also, it's a tax of rainbow colored because it has a rainbow dress. Oh, and it also can make, like, if like he wants it to rain so he can finally try out his new umbrella, then he could like make it rain because of the rainbow. And he can also, the tax can be gold. He has this new gold attack because of gold hair. Yeah, it's really cool.
Thank you for sharing, Dan. She is stealing the spotlight, but it's good. She needed some cheering up because she played some games with her older brother and she lost fairly decisively. So there were some tears and some, life is so unfair. Why do I always lose? And that sort of fits into my theme of addressing differences between the current Republican Party and the current Democratic Party. I'm using the tag Blue Wave 2022 because it has become impressed on me now that you can watch a bit of TV. Okay. That with all the gerrymandering and all the voter suppression legislation that various Republican-controlled state legislatures are introducing, and Joe Manchin's obduracy in opposing the S1 bill, the For the People Act, that's passed in the House but is being stymied in the Senate because Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema appear to be open to undue Republican influence, unfortunately, meaning that those important bills that were organized to protect the voting rights of the American people so that Black Americans weren't disproportionately targeted for negative attention from Republicans, targeted in a way that sounded on paper, or at least there was an avenue for claiming that they were just nice tidying up of the alleged voter fraud, cleaning up American politics by standardizing distribution of polling booths. To Republicans, that sentence sounds very rational and just eminently justifiable, but a lot of them do know that what it means is when you standardize polling booth locations, you say one standard issue polling booth for a rural location and one standard issue polling booth for a highly dense population in an urban area. And in practicality, what that means is people get to vote in the rural areas, and people in the urban areas are faced with huge long queues that are a deterrent to voting and that are effectively a poll tax on the time of African Americans who inhabit those more dense urban areas, which means it's making it more difficult for a demographic to vote that traditionally does evince more voting support for the Democratic Party. So it's a racist and anti-democratic and totalitarian maneuver to have a veneer of respectability, but with a fundamental goal of obstructing people's access to the vote, instituting a poll tax on their time. And I think it should be referred to as a poll tax because many Americans might remember that that is illegal from the 24th Amendment to the Constitution that says no poll tax shall be instituted on voters to make it difficult. Little White Lie says, my co-host is awesome with the breaking news. Yes, the For the People Act does a lot to expose the sources of dark money contributions, which I'll just call secretive because I'm very anti using pejorative terms, using darkness or blackness as a pejorative term, because society and indeed our world has enough problems with anti-black sentiment and feeding into people's unconscious biases and all of the attendant callousness and inhumanity that becomes calcified when you passively entertain racist attitudes or feed into racist prejudices. So somebody called Tyler Moore is here and says, enjoying the stream. Thank you, Tyler. There's a link up that says, how do you report suspected tax fraud activity? So I'm going to hope that people report Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I'm sure in a country of 331 million people, there will be someone who uses that reporting and that exposure of Marjorie Taylor Greene's apparent practice of claiming two large tax exemptions by claiming two different houses as her primary residence. So yes, Don Lemon says he's going to, tonight was his last show on CNN tonight with John Lemon, but then he did a follow-up post to assure viewers he's not leaving CNN altogether. And I have to say I'm including that because John Lemon is passionate. I don't really watch CNN, but I've seen clips on Twitter of Don Lemon sharing the story of Officer Michael Fanone, the officer who was pictured in some aerial shots, having been knocked unconscious by pro-Trump insurrectionists who dragged his body down the steps of the Capitol, tased him with his own taser multiple times, and were going to kill him. Some people in the crowd urged that he be protected and said, we're better than this. He called out that he had kids, and that seemed to help increase the protectiveness of some of the people close to him because they helped him get back to his colleagues where they were defending a door from the insurrectionists at the Capitol. And the footage from that is quite confronting, and Don Lemon visibly cried after showing that footage to his audience, which I think is important, an important bit of reality therapy, because what do you have therapy after? You have therapy after some kind of trauma or abuse, and the Republican Party is abusing the attention span of Americans. The Republican Party is abusing Americans by repeatedly lying to them about the insurrection attacks. So what I might do is go to my bookmarks, because I think I've bookmarked some of those videos which contrast a Republican leader denying that the insurrection happened and saying that it's just essentially a tourist event. There we go. This, first of all, is a graph. So I'll come back to the insurrection, but this is a graph saying that when you tell people, Americans, that you're polling, that would they be more, you ask them if they'd be more likely to take the vaccine if the mask and social distancing guidelines would be relaxed as a consequence, then there's an increase in people committing to the idea of taking the vaccine by 13 points. And the largest gains came from Republicans, who reported an 18-point increase in willingness to get vaccinated. So I think the CDC and the Biden administration are trying to do some kind of a trade-off of relaxing mask recommendations in order to bring on board more Republicans with that goal of achieving 80% vaccination, so that there is some degree of herd immunity, enough so that people with conditions that leave them vulnerable to COVID, conditions that raise their likelihood of having a severe or deadly case of COVID, if they're exposed to it, will be reduced. Because if you pursue an elimination strategy, then people are more free to go about their daily lives. And there's a lot of people who've been essentially trapped indoors for 18 months, which isn't strictly speaking necessary, because it should always have been made more clear that being outside is relatively safe, provided you're not in prolonged close proximity to other people. You can be outside alone by yourself, and that should have always been promoted as a good avenue for human activity during a pandemic. Do things by yourself. Doesn't mean stay home, never leave the house. It means don't go out to your customary socializing activities at restaurants or bars, but get your vitamin D, get your outdoor time, commune with nature. That will help contribute to your mental health. But I will say, when the last administration, the last Republican administration was in power, they weren't really keen on making those critical distinctions from people. They were just trying to make a political distinction to say Democrats just want to imprison you and Republicans want to free you, and so help the economy, which was always a false dichotomy. Did you get yourself one of those cookies? Like, Mummy? Yeah, Mummy said one. And can you get one for your brother too? And then Mummy will get you some raspberries as well. Yeah. So Little White Lies notes that voting booths should be a reflection of population density. They should be per capita, absolutely. But let's examine that Republican cover word when they're trying to put a veneer of respectability on things. They say they are standardizing the polling booths, which is a cover for making it, claiming it's even, but it's uneven, because without being related to population density, those people in densely populated urban areas will be massively underserved by polling booths, and there will be huge queues for voting, and it will be a deterrence to voters who cannot afford to take that much time off work, who can't afford to bring along enough supplies with them to last for a potential 12-hour wait. It's an outrage that shouldn't be countenanced by any American. And I think we should say this more strongly, because it's shameful for Republican voters to pretend that they don't understand what the Republican Party is doing. It's not just shameful for Republican politicians to propose it, it's shameful for Republican voters to pretend not to understand what's happening when Republicans massively underserve urban voters and cause them to spend hours and hours of their lives waiting in a queue merely to exercise the same vote that's more readily available to rural voters. And that's a disproportionate pandering and awarding of political power to people in rural areas. Well, we have to expose the fact that a lot of people in rural areas do feel entitled to that affirmative action, and they're used to it not being talked about. It's people are more accustomed to debating whether or not Black people deserve to be murdered by police officers, or were they asking for it. We should be changing some of the things we debate into saying, do rural voters deserve to have a political system that is weighted towards their votes at the expense of the access to voting for other people, at the expense of other people's ability to have collective political power through their votes. And the systems that exist that pander to rural voters are the Electoral College and the Senate malapportionment, which means because there's 2 senators for each state, regardless of population size, smaller states exert disproportionate political influence over the United States. And smaller states, not in terms of land size, but smaller states in terms of population size, are often highly rural areas where people are more likely to be white, conservative, and landowners. That's just a higher statistical probability when you have a smaller state. And many of those smaller states were added to US state totals in 1889 and 1890 by Republicans who wanted to increase their political representation and increase their political power at the expense of their political opponents. So again, a rigging or a perversion of democracy and a weighting of political power to certain landowning type of people who tend to also be white and often Christian because if they've descended in America from a long family history of landowners, and then they're part of the original group of Christians who fled England in order to obtain greater religious liberty. And it's great when America celebrates religious liberty. It's just not great when it celebrates it at the expense of others. And when we don't challenge the attitude of some Christians who feel that they are quintessentially American, that they are the more authentic Americans, and that other people don't deserve to have short voting times, that other people don't deserve to have proportionate representation in government relative to their population and community size. When those attitudes become rusted on or calcified even, that's when you get more political deadlock, because your minority groups are swollen and have become obstructive, because it's not the free and fair exercise of democracy, it is the swollen activity of various moneyed interests that have worked out how to exploit the spoilt petulance of entitled grievance, people infected with entitlement culture. Oh, yeah, I can tell you. Yeah, get one for your brother. He'll appreciate that. Okay, so I think I just wanted to check why Adderall was trending, and I found out why. So I'm going to listen. Yes.
What observation?
Another one. Only if you eat some fruit first. Okay.
I'll get some apple.
Okay.
Observations did you see as it relates to the president? Did he seem engaged? Did he have a high level of energy? You've been around Donald
Okay.
Trump. You've been around Joe Biden. What's the difference between the two men?
Look, this is the first time I saw Joe Biden as president since he's been in. I saw him on the inaugural and the State of the Union night. He didn't. He was with it, and he was engaging, and he was giving me numbers, and he was talking. But at no time, having known Joe Biden for quite some time, does he have the energy of Donald Trump. We both know it. Donald Trump didn't need to sleep 5 hours a night, and he would be engaged. If you called Donald Trump, he'd get on the phone before staff would. He'd bring other people down.
Yeah, Donald Trump was awake all hours of the night, tweeting and taking Adderall and snorting little tiny bits of white things out of his nose as he spoke. Brett Walker's here and says hello from Los Angeles. Hello, Brett. I think the most exciting point that I've been making today so far is that we, as a society, need to take charge of some of the debates, so that instead of having a debate of whether or not Black Lives Matter, it's hard to move away from that debate without the feeling that everybody's on board with accepting that basic tenet of humanity, that lives should matter and that Black lives have been disproportionately targeted for brutalization by police officers, in line with the rise of police unions around the country and the rise of police officer Bill of Rights that have enhanced the whole qualified immunity situation, giving police a license to position themselves as having interests that are antithetical to the members of the public, that instead of protecting and serving all Americans and all the people in certain communities, they have been given a pass to allow their personal biases to play. And we could see that in the audacity of Derek Chauvin, who believed that he could murder a black man in full daylight in front of children and adults, all of whom were begging him not to murder George Floyd and to exercise some care for his life and check his pulse and stop kneeling on his neck with insouciant, rakishly positioned sunglasses on his head and his feet off the floor of the ground. I should just say feet off the ground. We saw that audacity and we were repelled by his conviction that white society in America, or still a dominantly white society in America, would never find him accountable for that he was free to murder a black man in public against the opposition of members of the public who had gathered around, yelling and begging and pleading with him not to kill this man, to spare his life, and to go, nope, I'm enjoying this exercise of power. I'm exercising it in defiance of your stated opposition, because I have so much confidence that the system will allow me to get away with it. And it would have, had a woman not trained her camera phone on that situation for 10 minutes. And the unmerciful 10 minutes length of that footage was the only thing that stopped Derek Chauvin being able to get away with open murder. So that's really the takeaway from George Floyd, is that that one opportunity, that one act of courage enabled a lot of white Americans to break through the rusted on assumption that police officers may act mistakenly, may act in error, but that fundamentally they're trying to serve the public and they're trying to defend themselves, or they may be acting on justifiable fears. That video made it fundamentally obvious that there are at least some police officers who rely on those attitudes amongst the public, who rely on a dominance of those attitudes so that they know there'll be enough jury members to protect them from facing legal consequences for torture and murder conducted in public. Little White Lies says that Tom Cotton said we have an under-incarceration problem. Good job, Don. Yes. So Little White Lies says I should check out the Gaslit Nation podcast. Sarah and Andrea have been sounding the alarm. I'll just join my voices to them. Politics is additive. The more people we have who say it is critical that we face midterm elections in the United States with the same urgency as Americans did to the task of keeping Trump out of office for a second term. People understood it was America or Trump. And I think there's still some awareness that the Republican Party is choosing lies over reality, and that people who can engage mostly with reality do compose a bulk of the public, but that the system is still so weighted in favor of that minority of white evangelical or libertarian Republicans, that we have to pull out all the stops, and we can't just rest on our perceptions of, well, they're a minority of deluded people. They are very powerful deluded people who are backed by some fundamental flaws in the Constitution that were instigated to form a compromise between Americans of conscience who were interested in advancing abolition and ending slavery in the United States, and balancing that with the interests of white Christian landowners who used the Bible to defend slavery and who profited extensively on the basis of imprisoning, torturing, and dealing unjustly with the lives of Black people who had been brought to the United States or who were born in the United States within the system of chattel slavery. So it's very important to recognize the compromises that were baked into the Constitution. The Electoral College is a way of favoring rural states with a disproportionately large number of white landowners. The Senate is a way of disproportionately favoring white landowners from smaller population states and giving them disproportionate influence over America's system of government. And we have to recognize that threat in order to rise to meet the challenge of that baked in, constitutionally mandated affirmative action granted to white Christian slave owners, which was done initially to bring them on board with the new nation that was being founded, the United States. So it's not, we don't necessarily have to recognize it as baked in racism, although that's what it is. Racism is merely the name for the system of rationalizing the mistreatment of Black Americans, the mistreatment of enslaved Black people. That's what racism is. Racism is the intellectualization of I'm better than you, so it's okay. I'm sanctioned by God to enslave you. And there are some Bible passages that say the slave should obey the master. So it's all good. And I'm not doing anything wrong or unconscionable. I'm not going to just get stuck on pointing out that it's racist. I'm going to get stuck on pointing out the underlying principle, which is that it was a system of profiteering which was justified by various rationalizations that still persist in some people's mind and makes it more difficult for them to notice when Black people are being unduly targeted by similarly racist lensed police officers who, as often parents do, parents sometimes try to enforce obedience with their children, and police officers also sometimes overreact to what they seem to feel is disobedience. So all of the Black people that have been killed because they dared to seek to flee an encounter with police, and they've had shots fired into their back or head, or they've been knelt on for resisting arrest, even when they're clearly not resisting anymore, even when they're already dead. There's still been a knee pressed into their neck. So that's very important to recognize, to galvanize people still to vote in the midterm elections as if their lives and their democracies depended on it, because it does. Because Republicans are like spoiled children who have got an appetite for wrongdoing now because they've gotten away with it for so long, because of some weaknesses in the system of checks and balances. And those weaknesses have been capitalized on by the actions of adverse foreign governments who wanted America to be weaker, and so helped exacerbate tensions between people who acknowledge the challenges posed to America by racism and the harm borne by the Black community, both individually when individuals are harmed through various systems of economic deprivation or outright police persecution, but also the emotional harm that comes with having those problems under-recognized by majority white America. Oh, Brett Walker gave me a Appreciate Award. I appreciate that. Thank you, Brett. And Brett would love to have Sarah on Haps. Yes. Molly is waving hello. Brett, I'm going to say that I've been using the Clubhouse platform as well, just as not as a leader, but as a contributor or a speaker in other people's rooms. So I'm thinking that I should advocate for more elements that mimic some of Clubhouse's better elements of facilitating conversation and giving moderators power to line people up for the ability to briefly speak and have their microphone activated. Because when you can have a lot of people participate in a conversation, it is very attractive to a broader audience. So I know I do a lot of talking here, and and the ability to just bring on a lot of guests. I don't know how many guests I could bring on as the broadcaster here, but I'm thinking in a Clubhouse sense that if I could bring on a whole bunch of people and then just choose them one at a time to quickly have their say, that would be great. Oh, and yep, Brett's already said those are definitely things we're thinking about, Dav. Thank you, Brett. I'm so glad to hear it, because the pace and energy of some of those Clubhouse conversations, particularly around political matters, have been invigorating to me over the last few days. And I've had the ability to listen to guests with experience in diplomacy and broadcasting and legislative, passing legislation through Congress. It's been fascinating. Little White Lies has made a comment that got hidden, maybe because it has the word Palestine in it. I don't know. But it says, religion is the language of the oppressor. Look at what is happening in Palestine. Yeah, I didn't mute that. So I would like to say that I think the dialogue is shifting a little, and that more Americans are at least contemplating the idea that the billions of dollars a year America spends in support of Israel and Israel's military might be a contributing factor to Israel feeling that it can act with relative impunity in terms of evicting people from their homes. And I'm certainly happy to condemn Hamas and their commitment to responding aggressively to injustice, to responding with rocket fire to an intolerable situation of having Palestinian territory gradually eroded and people evicted from their homes and homes bulldozed. It is a form of colonialism that is associated with significant hardship for the people of Palestine. But I'll also say that Hamas is effectively a terrorist organization that oppresses their own people as well, which is a complicating factor. But yes, I think the US is probably ripe for reconsidering how much support they give to Israel, and that the Biden administration is probably motivated to do that, given that Trump sabotaged the ability for the Israeli government to relate to a democratic administration, because he formed such close and cooperative ties with Donald Trump at the expense often of Palestinian interests. So I had best go hang out with my family now, but thank you so much to everybody who listened and contributed today. Thank you for bringing up Palestine, Little White Lies. And I always want to be part of reintroducing the humanity of Palestinians into the conversation. So even as I will note that Palestinians do often suffer under the hands of Hamas, I will also say I think it's untenable that the Israeli government continues to expand illegal settlements into areas where Palestinian people live and work, and should have their rights protected by international courts. But even though the UN has said they don't consider it to be legal for Palestinians to be evicted from their homes in order for Israeli settlers to move in, that situation has still continued, and that it is untenable in a moral sense. That's my perspective, and I think more and more people would join me in that perspective if they're aware of families being compelled to leave their homes in order for Israel to make territorial gains and to gift people houses because they are Jewish, and then this expands the ethno-state that is Israel, which has pronounced itself, or the government has pronounced itself to be, a state that is Jewish, which contributes to the dehumanizing of people who live in Israel who are not Jewish, as well as the legal justification for relegating non-Jewish people to secondary citizen status. So thank you again. Thank you to Brett for dropping by. And if you ever want to come on stage as well and directly chat to my audience. Actually, you could put your hand up and I'd be happy to bring you on board. Is that something people normally do? Do perhaps team members occasionally add their face as well and their voice to a broadcast? Little White Lies says, according to Republicans, it was Black Lives Matter and Antifa that attacked the Capitol. Yes, well, Republicans say things now that we could just dismiss as having no credibility. I think we should acknowledge that we're saying it and that they are saying it and that it's untrue. But I'm not going to fuel my own personal outrage about that as much anymore, because I'm just trying to more efficiently dismiss their bad faith arguments. I'm trying to be efficient in that so I can construct better debate topics around things that I think people do really need to know in order to meet the challenges of our time. Americans need to know about the weighting of white rural votes so that they know that if they live in an urban center, they have to turn out and they have to cope with the voter suppression measures of Republicans in the hope that it's temporary and that we can finally give Democrats a stronger majority so that Joe Manchin's complicity with Republicans becomes less of a powerful tool of sabotage of democracy and less of a powerful tool for sabotaging the protection of voters' access to voting processes and less of a powerful tool for sabotaging raising the minimum wage and other important goals which would do so much to lift Americans out of a self-perpetuating cycle of poverty where people are paid so little they cannot have access to various mechanisms of social mobility. They cannot climb the ladder of education because they don't even have time to attend community college. Their lives are eaten up by having to have 2 or 3 jobs to make enough of a pittance to put food on the table and a roof over their families' heads. So Little White Lies says, good day. Thank you, Little White Lies. Take care, all the best, and see you again soon. Thanks for tuning in today. Bye, Molly. Bye, Brett. Bye, anybody else who enjoyed the stream today. Bye, Tyler. Cheers, everyone, and tune in tomorrow.